Is it possible to trust, to believe in Jesus and not fully trust him? Is it possible to believe in Jesus and not fully trust him? Maybe that's exactly where you are, but you're sitting here thinking, I don't know if I can say that out loud in church. I don't know if I want to fully admit that. And if that's you, that's okay. Today we're going to look at a guy who said that very thing directly to Jesus, right to his face. It's a bit of a wild story, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself with that. For the past several weeks, we looked at several questions, some of the most pointed and critical questions that Jesus asked people, ones that cut directly to the heart of what we believe and to faith. And a couple of weeks ago, I got to speak on this passage from Matthew chapter 16, where Jesus asks this critical question, what about you? Jesus asked, who do you say I am? And Simon Peter answers brilliantly in this moment. He says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. The Son of the living God. And it's this powerful moment, one that has been dubbed the Great Confession. This moment of saying, I believe in Jesus. And it's that very confession that we often repeat here at this church whenever someone walks into the waters of baptism, places their faith in Jesus and says, I believe in Jesus. But if we're honest, most of us may not live with that kind of clarity all the time. I mean, maybe there are moments where faith feels really strong, and then there are moments where faith feels a little bit shaky. Maybe there's moments where you're confident and moments where you're full of questions. Moments when you keep showing up or you keep watching online, but you're not entirely 100% sure. And let me just say, for those of you in that camp from the very beginning, that is okay. It's okay. And I'm glad you're here today, because for us, the next 2 weeks, we want today and next week to be really clear. We're going to do our best to be very practical, very clear about what faith is and what we should do because of it. And my hope is that through this time, you'll gain some clarity and you'll walk away with maybe a little bit of the pressure coming off as you listen in. Because I've had those moments myself where I believe and I'm also wondering, where I trust God, but I'm also struggling to understand exactly what's going on. Maybe you felt that way too. I felt it in times of loss. A time when my wife and I lost a child, a time when I lost my job, a time where I'm wrestling and waiting, and I've felt it in pressure from the outside world, pressure from within, stress, everything about it. Maybe you felt those things too, because when we talk about faith, a lot of us feel like we're supposed to have everything all together. Like everything has to be buttoned up and all together. And real faith means, right, that there's no doubts, no questions, no hesitation. Life looks perfect. Family looks perfect. No stress, no problems, and Jimmy Buffett is on repeat all the time, right? We know that's not true. And if we're being honest, that can make some of us feel like we're never going to measure up, because it's never going to be our reality, because we still have questions and we still wrestle. We have moments where we're not sure, and the tension becomes, well, then what is faith? Really? Is it certainty? Is it confidence? Is it having no doubts, or even just pretending like I don't have any doubts? And the question becomes then, how much faith is enough? How much faith is enough? Really? I mean, is it 100%? And if that's the number, then maybe you're feeling like you're never going to fully get there. So is it 90%? 75%? I mean, what number? Maybe you've never thought of it this way. And so today we want to talk about faith. And like I said earlier, the passage that we're going to look at is a guy who's pretty honest with Jesus about his struggles as it relates to faith. So this, my hope is threefold this morning. Number one, I want to define faith for us. So we're going to start there. Two, I want to help you see that faith does not mean that you have every question answered as soon as you walk out of these doors today. And three, I hope you understand that when faith is in Jesus, then it's not in yourself, and the pressure that we feel begins to fade away. So before we get to our key passage today, let's define faith first. And the writer of Hebrews did an incredible job of defining faith and then showing us what that looks like throughout the rest of Hebrews chapter 11. But Hebrews 11:1 just starts out with this. It's the idea that now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance of what we do not see. He defines it right there for us. Faith is confidence in what we hope for, and it's an assurance of what we do not see. That word confidence is not this wishful thinking mentality. It's not, well, I hope this works out. It's a settled trust, this sort of deep down conviction in us. And that word assurance, it means certainty, not because you see it all, but because you trust the God who said it. Faith isn't believing in spite of evidence, but it's trusting beyond what you can see. And so faith doesn't mean that you have all the answers and all of your questions. It just means you know who you're trusting, even when you don't have all the answers. So faith doesn't remove all of the uncertainty, but it does elevate your confidence. You see, faith is not a confidence in outcomes. It's a confidence in God, and that's a huge distinction. It means that when we're waiting, we're not waiting until every question is answered before we have faith, because you'll be waiting forever. Because faith, by definition, lives in this space where we're not everything is clear, that things are out of our control, things that we don't understand, things that you can't see. And faith doesn't eliminate that tension, but it does teach you to have the confidence in God as you go through it. So if you have your Bibles, open up to Mark chapter 9. Mark chapter 9 is where we're going to be. Starting in verse 14. Matthew and Luke, the other two gospel writers, also write about this very story. And in Mark chapter 9, there's this powerful, and I'll say it, it's a bit of a bizarre story. We're not going to focus in on all of the bizarreness of it, but we're going to get a picture of where faith and doubt coexist together. It's this perfect picture of what it can look like to not have a perfect faith, but to have an honest faith. Mark chapter 9, beginning in verse 14. It says, when they came, talking about Jesus and Peter, James and John are with him up on the Mount of Transfiguration. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and they ran to greet him. What are you arguing with them about? He asked. And so right before this story, Jesus has been up on this mountain with Peter, James, and John, has this incredible moment called the Transfiguration. We can't get into all that. If you know what it is, it's incredible. And Jesus has this mountaintop experience. He comes down off the mountain to just chaos. It's just, it's quite the scene. And Jesus arrives at this chaotic scene, and the teachers of the law, or the Pharisees, they're just fueling this madhouse. Because while Jesus is away, they've used, the teachers of the law have used this opportunity to discredit some of Jesus's disciples who, what we'll find out here in just a moment, is they have failed at an exorcism. And they're trying to discredit them in that. We're not told all about what the argument is, just that they're arguing. And when Jesus shows up, they're excited. They're so excited. In fact, they might just be they says that they're overwhelmed. They might just be relieved. Like, Jesus is so much better at dealing with them than we are. Man, we're just glad you're here, Jesus. You take it from here, please. And Jesus' question to them, what are you arguing with them about? It's not fully answered by the disciples. They never answer the question. But it's clear that they've been arguing pretty intently. The word here that's used for argue indicates that they were going at it pretty good. This was an intense argument. They weren't just bantering back and forth. They were getting after it. Instead, the father of a young boy decides to answer. The disciples don't answer, but the father of a young boy, who we'll learn about here shortly, he's tired, he's exhausted. He's exhausted from everything that his son's been going through, and he speaks up instead. Verse 17 says, a man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son." And Luke's gospel tells us that this is his only son. "I brought you my son who's possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and he becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." "You unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." And this description of this boy is heartbreaking. Matthew points out that these symptoms are somewhat like epilepsy. What's interesting is that the gospel writer Luke, who's a physician, leaves that detail out, maybe so it doesn't get confused with the idea that we're dealing more with a spiritual attack than we are a physical one. And what's going on with this boy is it's awful. And it's brought this dad to an exasperation. Maybe as a parent you could relate to this if you've ever seen your child struggle with something with health or mental. No doubt this dad is tired. He's tired from everything to this point. He's done so many things. He's exhausted all resources and nothing has worked. Nothing. And so you can imagine the worry that he's experiencing and time that he's spent tending to his son's problems, the sleepless night, the frustrating mornings, everything that's going on. But what ends up with this 9 disciples who aren't able with Jesus in this moment, that they've given it their best effort at this. It just didn't work. And they're unsuccessful. And it's not that they haven't cast out demons before. Mark chapter 3, Mark chapter 6, both times they've been able to cast out demons. Jesus gave them authority. They were successful. But this time they weren't. And we're not fully told why right away. We'll get to that in a moment. But it has a bit of why Jesus is frustrated in this moment. He says, "You unbelieving generation, how long shall I put up with you?" He's a little bit frustrated with the disciples in this moment. Verse 20, "And so they brought him. And when the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. This evil spirit knows who Jesus is, and he knows that his time is limited at this point. And so he decides to get in one last hurrah before Jesus makes him leave." Verse 21, Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It was often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." You can almost hear the exhaustion and exasperation in this father's voice. Please just help us. And we need to pay attention to this here, because there's this appearance of faith in the father. He has some faith. Take pity on us and help us. He understands who to come to. He says, but it's right alongside some doubt. He's tried everything. What could it hurt to maybe bring it to Jesus? There's this element of doubt here where he says, if you can. And Jesus responds to him. He looks him direct in the eye. He says, "If you can," said Jesus. He says, verse 23, "Everything is possible for one who believes." And immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." And I love this raw and honest just exasperation of the father in this time. He doesn't hide behind some fancy words. He doesn't try to even impress Jesus, like make him seem like he's a little further along than what he is. He just says it like it is. He tells him honestly, I believe, but I'm not all the way there yet. Can you help me overcome my unbelief? Verse 25, when Jesus saw that the crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. This crowd is growing, and Jesus doesn't want to put on a show. He doesn't want to cause a bigger scene than what's already going on. So he refers to the spirit by what he's doing to the boy. He says, you deaf and mute spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. And the boy looked so much like a corpse that many said he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand, lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. And after Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out? And he replied, this kind can come out only by prayer. Now, what's interesting about this is that Mark doesn't mention it, neither do Matthew or Luke. They don't actually record Jesus praying when he drives the spirit out. So did they leave something out of the story, or did Jesus mean something else? We don't know fully, but I'm going to give you my theory, okay? The disciples' failure, I don't believe, was due to a lack of authority. They've done this before, but a lack of dependence on God for the work. When Jesus says that this kind can only come out through prayer, he's saying that it isn't so much about a technique as it is about a relationship and a reliance on God. You see, the father in the story isn't the only one growing in faith today. So are the disciples. And maybe they've grown too comfortable in their own abilities. They've gotten too self-reliant, and they've missed that this is God's work and not theirs. That's why Matthew tells us that Jesus' response to this very question included this in Matthew chapter 17, verse 20. He said to them, he says, because you have so little faith, truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Again, the problem isn't in their technique, it was in their faith. Jesus is saying that just a little bit of faith, this faith the size of a mustard seed, can overcome enormous problems. Now, Jesus is speaking figuratively here because while moving a mountain is a pretty cool party trick, Jesus never did it. There's no record of God doing it either, other than when he made them, which is cool. But standing in the shadow of the Mount of Transfiguration, Jesus' point would have hit hard. It would have been incredibly impactful for the disciples who knew what had just happened. He's saying you do not have to have huge faith and personally do enormous things. Just a little bit of faith, and God supplies the rest. It's exactly what had happened when this father of this young boy comes to him. His little bit of faith turned over to God to accomplish what hadn't happened before. And there's three things that I think we can see in this story about faith specifically. Number one, faith doesn't mean that you have no doubts. Number two, faith is not in yourself, it's in Jesus. And number three, faith moves towards Jesus even when it's uncertain. Let's unpack those for just a moment. Faith doesn't mean you have no doubts. The Father helped us see this very thing. This father had belief and unbelief all at the same time. He says, I do believe. Help me in my unbelief. I love his raw honesty with Jesus, this confession that helps us see that faith and doubt can coexist. And Jesus honors that request. And this little bit of faith, this teeny tiny mustard seed of faith. Faith doesn't mean that you have no doubts. Second, faith is not in yourself, it's in Jesus. The Father isn't confident in himself. He's desperate for something beyond himself. It's very possible that he's exhausted all of his resources, all of his time, all of his energy, and he's just come up dry. I mean, think about it. As a parent, what lengths would you go to make sure that your son or daughter gets well? All the way, right? No one can tell him what to do. No one can tell him this thing will work. They've tried it all and it's not worked and they've given up, but the Father hasn't. We do this sometimes ourselves. We try and we try and we try all on our own. We're really good at trying on our own. We get a good job, we make good money, we buy a nice house, we drive a nice car. Our kids make the honor roll. Life looks great on the outside. Everything looks buttoned up and pretty. And deep down, we have this sense that something is missing. That while we have it all together, we still don't. All of the success, all of the accomplishment, it still feels empty in some way. Or maybe you're the complete opposite, where good jobs have been difficult to come by and emotions seem to just pass you by, and difficulty has followed you from bad decisions yourself and things that have happened to you. Everything in life just seems like it's a hot mess all the time, and you don't feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe you're here and you're feeling like, I've tried everything else. I've tried it all. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried, and it just seems empty. Success or mess. Neither has worked. And friends, faith in Jesus is the only way life works best. It won't mean that all the circumstances will change, but the peace that you have by walking with God through your circumstances, through it all, success or mess, will change everything else. Again, faith is not a confidence in outcomes, it's a confidence in God. And so you have the Father, but there's a second audience that kind of learns something new about faith. The disciples in this moment, they're the ones who've been with Jesus for the longest time. They still have something to learn. They've seen some unbelievable things in their time, and they still need another lesson to learn. Friends, if that sounds like you, do not miss this one. There are some of you who have been a Christian for longer than I've been alive. Many of you have been Christians longer than you were not. And if you're like me and you grew up in the church, or you've been a Christian follower for a lot of years, there's something for us to learn and to just keep growing. Stay soft-hearted. Listen to God more than your own experience, more than your own past. Because if faith is not in yourself, it's in Jesus. And then last, faith moves towards Jesus, even when it's uncertain. This Father still came. He still asked. He still trusted. He had no clue how it was going to turn out. There were no guarantees that it would, but he moved towards Jesus anyway. Just a little bit of faith. The faith the size of a mustard seed moves towards Jesus. And so what do we do with this? Because for us, there's two kind of people in the room. There's some of you that you've never crossed the line of faith yet. You're listening, you're asking questions, you're trying to figure out, what do I believe? Do I believe? And if I can, let me remind you that faith isn't having everything figured out. It's trusting Jesus even when you don't. And I'm really glad that you're here, because faith doesn't begin with having all of the questions, all of the stories, all of the things kind of figured out. It just means that you trust the one who does. And if that's where you are, stay curious. Keep asking questions. Keep leaning in. Keep showing up. But I also want to say that I'm praying, and many in our church are praying, that at some point your curiosity would move towards a decision. Move toward, because Jesus doesn't just invite observation, he invites trust. For some of you, you're closer than you think. You don't have every question answered. You don't know all the stories. I don't care, and neither does he. But you've seen enough. You've experienced enough. You've read enough. You've heard enough. You've felt enough. You've sensed the power of God working in you enough. And maybe today is the day where you stop standing at a distance like the people in the crowd just watching things happen, and you say, I'm going to Jesus. I do believe. Help me in my unbelief. It's not perfect faith, but it's honest faith. Maybe your prayer is just like that, Father. I do believe. Help me in my unbelief. Paul made the step of faith really clear and really simple when he wrote in Romans chapter 10, verse 9, he says, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, then what? You will be saved. It's that simple. It really is that simple. You declare with your mouth and believe in your heart. And so back to the question that we had before, how much faith is enough? Well, it's not 100%, right? It's not 75%. What if it's 51%? What is just simply 51% convinced? Just enough to move past middle, past the unbelief to belief, to say, I do believe, Jesus. Help me in my unbelief. If that's you today, can I ask you for a favor? But if you have kids, before you go check them out, come talk to me after the service. After we're all done singing and people are starting to exit, I'm going to stick around. I'd love to have a conversation with you. If you're already in this camp, don't come talk to me today. I'd rather talk to someone who wants to meet Jesus for the first time. Maybe that's you today. I'd love to celebrate with you, answer some questions, and make sure we have your name so that we can follow up with you. But there's another group of us in this story and in this room. It's those who've already been following Jesus for a while. You know the stories, or at least some of them. You know the language, or at least you're pretty good at faking it. And you've seen God work before. And if we're not careful, faith can slowly drift into familiarity, where you stop spending time with Jesus and you start relying on what you already know. And that's what's happening to the disciples in this story. They'd done it before. They'd seen God move. But somewhere along the way, dependence just turned into an assumption. And Jesus gently reminds them, this kind only comes out through prayer. In other words, this still requires a move of God. And so if you've been following Jesus for years, don't settle. Don't coast. Don't let your faith grow stagnant. Stay soft-hearted and dependent. Stay close to Jesus. Because the goal isn't to just have started in faith, it's to keep growing in faith. Keep growing. Stay close to Jesus. I want to give you a chance to take that simple prayer the Father had, this confession he had to Jesus, and turn it into a prayer for yourself. I'm going to close with this question for you to just reflect in, to take this prayer to Jesus. Say, my unbelief in, and you fill in that blank. My unbelief in is holding me back. Can you help me in my unbelief? Take some time, talk to God about it, and we'll continue in worship.